The hall was silent, too silent for a room that had moments ago been buzzing with chatter, laughter, and the restless shuffling of young students. Hundreds of eyes now rested on one boy who stood at the center of the stage. He was thin, his shoulders not yet fully grown into the jacket he wore, his voice not yet deep enough to command the kind of attention he was suddenly holding. And yet, in that moment, 16-year-old Avishkar Raut seemed taller than anyone else in the hall, as though he carried something burning inside him. His lips trembled for a second, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was about to say. "We are the fire," he began, his voice steady, each word like a spark in the stillness. The words cut through the silence, igniting something invisible in the crowd. Avishkar wasn't a boy who often sought attention. At school, he had been known for sitting at the back of the classroom, scribbling poems in the margins of his notebooks while teachers lectured about formulas and battles from history. His classmates liked him, but they didn't really know him. Not until that day. That day changed everything. To understand why those 4 words, "We are the fire," set Nepal ablaze with hope, you have to step back into Avishkar's life, to the boy who walked through narrow streets with torn shoes, who carried not just his own dreams, but the broken dreams of a generation on his shoulders. Avishkar grew up in a small town where the mountains loomed like giant guardians, where rivers carved through the earth like veins of life, and where the people, though rich in spirit, often struggled to make ends meet. His father was a mechanic, his hands always black with grease, his back bent with years of labor. His mother stitched clothes for neighbors, earning a few rupees at a time, her eyes squinting late into the night under the flickering bulb of their one-room home. Despite the struggles, their home was warm, alive with laughter and love. Avishkar's parents believed in education as the only path out of hardship. "Books are wings," his mother would tell him. "If you learn to use them, no cage can hold you." But wings felt heavy when the world clipped them at every turn. Avishkar saw his friends drop out of school to work in tea shops, to migrate abroad as laborers, to marry young. He watched bright eyes dim under the weight of poverty and hopelessness. And each time, something inside him burned hotter. He began to write. At first, just simple poems, about rivers, about the sky, about the ache of watching dreams crumble. Then, about his country, about its people, about the fire he felt swelling in his chest. His notebooks filled with words that felt too big for his age, words that carried the weight of voices often silenced. It was his teacher, Mrs. Sharma, who first noticed. One morning, after class, she picked up a crumpled sheet of paper he had left behind. She read the words and looked up at him, her eyes glistening. "Avishkar," she said softly, "you don't just write. You speak for others. Never let this fire die." Months later, a youth conference was announced in the capital. Hundreds of students from across Nepal would gather to speak, to debate, to share visions for the future. Avishkar's school was allowed to send one student. To everyone's surprise, the teachers chose him. He was terrified. He had never stood on a stage before, never faced more than 30 pairs of eyes at once. But he also knew this was his chance. His parents borrowed money for his bus ticket, his mother stitched him a clean shirt, and his father pressed his hand firmly on his shoulder the morning he left. "Don't be afraid of their eyes," his father said. "Speak as if you are speaking for me. For us all." The conference hall was enormous, brighter than any place Avishkar had ever seen. Banners with bold letters hung across the walls. Students in crisp uniforms and polished shoes walked confidently, their voices loud, their laughter sharp. Avishkar felt small, out of place. His shirt felt too plain, his accent too raw, his ideas too heavy. When it was finally his turn, he climbed the steps to the stage, his heart pounding like a drum. He almost faltered, almost let fear swallow him whole. But then he remembered his mother's words, "Books are wings," and his father's rough hands pressing strength into his shoulder. He raised his chin, took a breath, and began. "We are the fire." The words rolled out with a force that surprised even him. He spoke not from memorization, but from the burning truth in his chest. We are the fire that they tried to silence when they told us we were too young, too poor, too small to matter. We are the fire that will not burn out, no matter how much darkness tries to smother us. Look around you, our rivers cry for us, our mountains wait for us, our people bleed for us. And still they tell us to be quiet, to wait, to dream later. But we are the fire. We cannot wait. We will not wait. His voice cracked once, but it only made him sound more human, more real. Tears glistened in the eyes of strangers who had never heard of him until that moment. By the time he finished, the silence that had greeted him exploded into thunderous applause. Phones recorded him, cameras flashed, and before the evening was over, his words were already being shared across Nepal, then across borders. But viral fame is a strange thing. When Avishkar returned home, his neighbors greeted him like a hero. Children followed him through the streets, chanting, "We are the fire." Teachers praised him, newspapers wanted interviews, and his face appeared on posters and screens. Yet, not everyone was kind. Some called him arrogant, too young to understand the world. Others dismissed him as a passing sensation, a boy who spoke well but would fade like all the rest. The sudden attention overwhelmed him. At night, when the lights were out, he lay awake, wondering if his words truly meant anything. Was he really the fire, or just a spark that would die out in the wind? His doubts deepened when his father fell ill. Weeks of hard labor had worn down his body, and the hospital bills piled up faster than the family could pay. Avishkar felt powerless, caught between the weight of his family's struggles and the expectations of an entire country looking at him as a voice of hope. One evening, as he sat outside their home staring at the dark mountains, his mother came to sit beside him. She placed her hand on his shoulder, just as his father once had. "Avishkar," she whispered, "fire is not just about burning bright. It is about enduring. Even the smallest flame can light the way in the darkest night. Do not forget why you began." Her words anchored him. He realized that his speech wasn't the end, it was the beginning. If he let the fire die now, it wouldn't just be his loss. It would be the loss of every young dreamer who saw themselves in him. And so, Avishkar began again. He started small, organizing reading circles for neighborhood children, teaching them the poems and stories that had once kept him alive. He gathered his classmates and launched a youth group focused on community projects, cleaning rivers, planting trees, tutoring younger students who couldn't afford coaching classes. His words weren't just words anymore. They became actions, proof that fire can burn quietly but powerfully. Slowly, people noticed. His group grew larger, spreading from one town to another. Schools invited him to speak, not as a viral boy, but as a leader. Journalists who once doubted him now followed him. Most importantly, children who had given up on dreams began to dream again. One day, at a gathering much smaller than the grand conference where it all began, Avishkar looked into the eyes of a little girl who clutched his hand tightly after his speech. "Will you always be the fire?" she asked shyly. He smiled, his heart swelling with something deeper than pride. "No," he said gently. "We will. Together." Years later, people would still talk about that boy who stood on a stage at 16 and declared that we are the fire. They would talk about the way his words spread like sparks across Nepal, the way they refused to die out even when storms tried to snuff them. But for Avishkar, the legacy wasn't in the fame, nor in the headlines. It was in the laughter of children who found hope again, in the hands of neighbors working side by side, in the quiet strength of communities who remembered that even the smallest flame could fight the darkness. And in his heart, he carried the simple truth that had guided him all along. Fire does not ask permission to burn. It simply burns. And so, the boy who once doubted himself stood firm as a man who lit the way, not because he was extraordinary, but because he dared to remind others that they already carried the fire within them. The story of Avishkar Raut is not just about one boy. It is about every young person who feels too small, too unheard, too powerless.